Coming up on Primetime News, the Korean economy recorded its highest growth rate since the second quarter of 2010, thanks in part to strong domestic consumption and the government's supplementary budget. Participants can hardly wait for time to pass as the pre-session for another round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War begins. In the hot seat before lawmakers were officials at the presidential office of Cheong, questions thrown revolved around proposed changes to history textbooks and failure to obtain key fighter jet technologies from the U.S. Stay with us for these stories and more. It's 10 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to Primetime News. I'm Daniel Choy. We start with some welcome news for the Korean economy. The central bank says Korea's third quarter GDP growth hit a 5-year high as domestic demand offsets sluggish exports. Shin Se-min takes a closer look at whether the positive upswing can continue.
The Korean economy grew 1.2% on quarter in the July to September period. That's the highest growth rate since the second quarter of 2010 and the first time in 6 quarters for the rate to top 1%. On year, the country's gross domestic product grew 2.6%. The Bank of Korea credited a solid rebound in domestic consumption and a pickup in government spending for the overall growth.
Government's efforts to reinvigorate spending, like cutting consumption tax and a fiscal stimulus package, including an extra budget plan, had a positive effect on the third quarter figures.
And that trend is likely to continue, at least until the end of this year.
With the consumption tax cut scheduled to last until the end of this year, added with the government's supplementary budget, the economy will likely maintain its 1% growth throughout the fourth quarter.
And that's without the help of the country's outbound shipments. Exports, making up half the country's economy, were down 0.2% during the third quarter due to sluggish global demand coupled with a slowdown in China. The central bank said the strong comeback in the third quarter is a sign that the economy is on a recovery track. But experts remain concerned as the current pace of growth cannot be sustained by domestic demand alone, highlighting the need for improved exports. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The Korean stock index inched up along with other Asian stock markets. The driving force behind this trend, the European Central Bank remarks that suggest more stimulus measures. Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Asian stock markets rallied Friday on expectations of more stimulus measures from the European Central Bank. Korea's benchmark Kospi jumped 1% from the previous day, rising above the 2050 level during midday trading, a 3-month high to close at 2040. Hong Kong's Hang Seng China Enterprises Index increased 1.2%, while Japan's benchmark Topix Index climbed nearly 2%. Markets are reacting to remarks made by ECB President Mario Draghi in a monetary policy meeting held in Malta on Thursday. He said the central bank would examine its €60 billion a month asset purchase program in December, as well as an interest rate cut.
The risk to the euro area growth outlook remain on the downside, reflecting in particular the heightened uncertainties regarding developments in emerging market economies, which have the potential to further weigh on global growth and foreign demand for euro area exports.
The ECB move comes as central banks in Japan and the United States both consider monetary policy next week. Seoul-based KB Investment and Securities Company projects the U.S. Federal Reserve to raise its key interest rate in December, while offering just a 6% chance of an increase next week.
Draghi's statement boosts confidence among investors and markets that the central bank will be able to keep its vow to continue its quantitative easing policy through September next year.
The analyst added that it'll be too early to predict if global markets will turn to riskier assets due to the volatility of emerging markets. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Preparations have begun for the second round of family reunions between South and North Koreans separated by the Korean War more than 6 decades ago. Our Kwan So-ah is standing by in Sokcho, the meeting place for the families from the South. So-ah, fill us in.
Hi again, Daniel. Now, most of the South Korean participants getting ready for the second round of reunions that begins tomorrow are now in their rooms here at Hanwha Resort, trying to get a little bit of rest before the big day. Now, the pre-session also took place here at the first round of the family reunions. But the difference this time is that while last time it were the North Koreans who applied to see their South Korean family members, this time it's the other way around. Now, as most of the participants' hometowns are in the north, organizers are saying the atmosphere could be somewhat different from the last meeting, even more emotional. Now, in total, 254 South Koreans from 90 families are expected to meet with 188 North Koreans. Now, tomorrow through Monday, the families from the two Koreas will meet on the North Korean side at the Mount Kumgang Resort for group and private meetings lasting a total of 12 hours.
And they'll want to make every second count. So what's going through their minds right now?
Well, Daniel, understandably, most of them are very excited, but also for many of them, this whole event seems surreal, just like for this 92-year-old woman who is one of the only 4 families in which a mother gets to see her son in the north for the first time in more than 60 years. And I got a chance to talk with her.
민손비 큰아들 만나러 갑니다.
Min was 29, her son 9, the last time they saw each other.
마지막으로 아드님의 기억나는 모습이 어떤 모습이에요?
기억나는 거? 기억나는 거 뭐 저거 개구제구나 하고 그냥 개구제 되지 아주. 개구제라고 그냥 개구제라고 이름을 지어갔다 할머니가 그럴까지 된 아주 개구제 됐어.
When the war broke out, her family had to flee, but her son was left behind with his grandmother.
밤중에 배가 와서 한 집에 한 가족씩 타라고 그래서 조그만 배인데 그래가지고 나왔는데 그 대암 날이지 사람 신라 가려고 그랬더니 꼭 맥혀서 내가 마지막으로 나왔어.
만나시면 가장 먼저 이야기 나누고 싶은 게 어떤 거예요?
말하고 싶은 거? 그렇지. 말하고 싶은 거 뭐 내 아버지 이름이 뭐냐 대면하려면 내 아버지 이름이 뭐냐고 물어보고서 이름 제대로 대면은 네가 그런 내 자식이구나 그렇게 생각하지요. 처음엔 그렇게 그걸 물어봐야지.
Mrs. Min kept on saying that she still can't believe that she'll be meeting her son. Her younger son applied for the reunions more than 10 years ago. Her family says that they know this is most likely going to be the last time their mother would see her eldest son, but that they are still very thankful for this event, bringing them together. Let's wish them and the other participants and also the separated families who are not lucky this time the best. This has been Kwan So-ah reporting live from Sokcho, Hanwha Resort.
All right, thank you for that report, So-ah. Staying on the subject of family reunions, we are joined by one of our reporters who was at the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea for 3 days during the first round of reunions. Unification Ministry correspondent Song Ji-sun. Glad to have you back with us, Ji-sun.
Good to be back here and here in the studio.
Well, first of all, we've been watching it through the television. We want to hear firsthand from someone who was there in person.
Well, first of all, it's a relief that all participants returned home safe and sound after meeting with their families for the first time in more than 6 decades. And out of those 97 tables during the first round, there is not a single family that you can pass by without shedding tears. Now, families were saying they didn't know it was going to take this long, more than 6 decades, to meet each other again, with many of them already having held memorial services, thinking their beloved ones had passed long ago. Now, although the sessions were extended by an hour from the previous reunions, it cannot be enough for these families. They wish they could stay at least one night together, but both sides are strictly restricted at Mount Kumgang's tourism complex, and they're staying in different hotels. Now, for the second round, South Korean families enter the venue only after their North Korean families are fully seated and ready to greet them at the tables.
Well, from where we were standing, it seemed to run quite smoothly, but were there any interesting anecdotes?
Well, it was another relief that the reunion was carried out as scheduled, but there were some stories behind scenes. For example, for the first round, upon crossing the border on Tuesday, North Korean officials screened all laptop computers of South Korean journalists and tablet PCs of the families. Now, transporting video footage shot by the broadcast journalist was also delayed as North Border Office stopped the delegation on that first day. Now, we're hoping that doesn't happen this time around, but besides those interruptions, the event proceeded without big issues. Now, participants from the two sides hope that the reunion be held on a regular basis, and some North Korean officials I've talked to on the scene also expressed high hopes of resuming the tour program at Mount Kumgang.
Now, the event venue, it hasn't been used for the intended purpose for some time. How was it?
Well, as the venue was unused for 7 years after a South Korean tourist was shot by North Korean soldiers in 2008, there were some concerns prior to the event. But thanks to repair and maintenance services or efforts prior to the event by the South Korean government, there were no particular inconveniences. Now, South Korea's Unification Ministry has also dispatched fire trucks and ambulances to guarantee the safety of the South Korean participants, with all medical resources on standby. But for the second round, the Korean Red Cross have revved up their medical support as there are older participants traveling from the south. There are no participants from the north who is over the age of 90, but more than 30 South Koreans are, with two aged 98. This is the 20th reunion event held since the first one in 2000, but way more should be held as over 66,000 people are still on the wait list.
Well, Jisun, thank you for your insider's look into the family reunion event.
Thank you.
At the National Assembly, lawmakers don't see eye to eye on the government's recent decision, including the one to reintroduce complete state control over history textbooks through related questions at presidential office officials. Park Ji-won zooms in on the heated debate.
As the presidential office of Cheong underwent its annual parliamentary audit on Friday, lawmakers grilled officials from the top office over various matters that have been the center of political strife. The government's recent decision to reintroduce a state-issued history textbook for the nation's middle and high school students took the center stage of the session. Presidential Chief of Staff Lee Byung-gi dispelled the accusations from some lawmakers that the decision mirrored President Park Geun-hye's strong willingness to redirect the nation's history education, citing that the Education Ministry took the lead in the decision and that the presidential office did not exert direct influence on the matter.
Regarding the history textbook issue, I'm aware of meetings between the ruling party and the government, but the presidential office has never given any direct guidelines to the Education Ministry regarding the matter.
Lawmakers also questioned the presidential officials on Seoul's failure to obtain 4 core technology transfers from the U.S., crucial to the development of its indigenous fighter jet program codenamed KFX. One of the key points of contention surrounds whether the Korean government was aware of any potential issues with technology transfers when it decided on Lockheed Martin for the project. But Kim Kwan-jin, chief of the National Security Office, argued that the 4 technologies are not essential to the $16 billion KFX project.
We can develop the 4 technologies on our own. It is untrue that we need the technology transfer to proceed with the fighter jet program.
Some are demanding that the chief presidential security advisor, who served as defense minister at the time of the request, assume full responsibility for the matter. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
As the political wrangling continues at the National Assembly, the ruling Century Party has urged the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy to cooperate in normalizing parliamentary affairs. The ruling party stressed Friday that economy-related bills to help boost Korea's stagnant economy have been sitting idle at the National Assembly for 3 years. However, the NPAD chose to express concerns over the push for state-authored history textbooks and threatened to boycott all parliamentary sessions, including those on revising next year's budget bill. The parliament has until December 2nd to pass the budget bill, although lawmakers have consistently failed to meet the deadlines. South Korea on Friday called for dialogue with North Korea on nuclear issues as Seoul is ramping up efforts to play a more active role in dealing with Pyongyang's nuclear program. Hwang Jun-guk, Seoul's top nuclear envoy, said he was ready to meet with his Pyongyang counterpart and reach common ground to resolve the nuclear issue. The reclusive regime previously struck a deal to denuclearize in return for foreign aid, but the six-party talks involving South Korea, China, Japan, Russia, and the U.S. have been stalled for the past 7 years. North Korea's artillery threats will be effectively countered by the United States Forces Korea's 2nd Infantry Division, despite its relocation next year. Connie Kim fills us in on how the additional rotational rocket battalion and South Korea's well-equipped infrastructure will help in such efforts.
The United States Forces Korea's 2nd Army Infantry Division will have no issues with countering North Korea's artillery threats. Commanding General Theodore Martin made the remarks when asked about relocating the unit to Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province, 70 kilometers southeast from its current location. An additional rotational rocket battalion was added to the unit early this year to better buffer against North Korea's long-range rocket threats, boosting its combat capability.
So the rotational battalion, which was just added to the division structure, gives us increased capability both in M270A1 rocket launchers, but also in the ability of their radars to detect incoming missiles. I am very well provided in what we call precision-guided munitions.
Martin also reassured the relocation will not affect the unit's training capabilities, as equipment will be transferred by rail to current training areas.
It does not matter where I am based because of the wonderful infrastructure that the Republic of Korea has that allows me to rapidly move north and south by rail or by road.
Out of some 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea, about 12,000 troops are deployed to the U.S. 2nd Army Infantry Division. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
This year marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of South Korea's Navy. A fleet review was held in Busan to commemorate the occasion. Our Kim Hyun-bin takes us to southern port city where the celebration was held.
In a line formation, several warships take aim and fire. Bullseye. Anti-submarine helicopters shoot off missiles after detecting an enemy submarine. It isn't real world, but is part of the South Korean Navy's special exercises to mark its 70th anniversary. More than 24 warships and aircraft take part in the live firing exercises and training drills held off Korea's southern coast.
We invited many citizens to our naval review. We conducted several naval training drills, including anti-submarine and special operations. With the support from citizens, our Navy will do everything to defend our maritime sovereignty.
Spectators are impressed and show their appreciation by cheering and clapping.
I brought my family here. I saw our country's naval power firsthand, and as a South Korean citizen, I feel safe thanks to them.
Watching the exercise, I feel good, and I'm so proud of our Navy sons.
This is the South Korean Navy's 3rd Fleet Review. It has been held every 10 years since 1995.
The Naval Review is aimed at showing Korea's naval readiness and to assure the public that the Navy is ready to protect the country's seas. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Busan.
More than 300 people, including diplomats and United Nations-related officials, gathered in Seoul to mark the 70th anniversary since the founding of the UN. The event comes a day ahead of the UN Day on October 24th, a day dedicated to the global efforts and achievements of the global body. Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and the acting president of the UN Association of Korea gave a welcome speech. This was followed by a performance by the Diplomatic Choir of Seoul. On the following day, Korea will also join in the Turn the World UN Blue event by lighting up the Seoul Metropolitan Government building in blue to symbolize unity among global citizens and world peace. Now for international headlines, today we're joined by Lee Sun-ho at the News Center. Sun-ho, what's happening around the world?
Good evening, Daniel. Well, a deadly car crash killed more than 40 in France. Clinton defended her Benghazi record from a congressional panel, and a large tunnel was discovered beneath the U.S.-Mexico border.
I see, Sun-ho. Could you first give us updates on France, as they say this is the nation's worst car crash in years? What exactly happened?
Sure, Daniel. 42 people, mostly comprised of senior citizens, died when a bus collided head-on with a truck in southern France. The accident took place on the D17 highway and was the nation's worst road accident since 1982. According to emergency workers, most of the victims died in the ensuing fire. In a statement, the French president called it a great tragedy, while the local mayor said the bus driver did everything in his power to prevent a collision.
The bus driver saw that the accident was going to happen, did everything to avoid it, but did not succeed. He did manage to open the emergency doors, letting a few people out.
The bus had departed early Friday from a small village near the site of the accident. 8 survivors are in the hospital, 3 of whom are to be treated for brain trauma and burns. The other 5 did not sustain critical injuries. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton survived an 11-hour hearing in Congress, deflecting Republican criticism over how she handled the 2012 attack in Benghazi, Libya, which killed 4 Americans, including the ambassador. She insisted that she barely used emails during her work as Secretary of State and that this should not be used to judge her decision-making abilities. Clinton said that most of her work was done face-to-face through memos and by the use of diplomatic cables.
Most of my work was not done on emails with my closest aides, with officials in the State Department, officials in the rest of the government, as well as the White House and people around the world.
And thank you. Now, Democrats came to Clinton's aid by saying that the accusations were mainly politically motivated to stunt her run as the Democratic presidential candidate. Also, on a side note, analysts say that Michael Bay's upcoming movie, 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, that tells the real-life story of the attack, may affect Clinton's campaign. And lastly, authorities announced that they have discovered a huge advanced underground tunnel used to smuggle drugs between the U.S. and Mexico. The tunnel connected warehouses near the U.S. city of San Diego and Tijuana in Mexico, and it was found on Wednesday after raids were conducted on both sides of the border at the same time. Officials said the tunnel was about 9 meters deep and more than 700 meters long and contained lighting, a ventilation system, and rail tracks for easy transportation. Now, pulleys are believed to have been used to load and unload drugs on the U.S. side of the tunnel. The Mexican police have arrested 2 suspects who say they were working for a drug cartel operating in the state of Jalisco. And that does it for your international news at this hour. Have a good night.
The levels of ultrafine and fine dust have subsided back to normal in the metropolitan areas, whereas the regions near Jeollado Province and Gangwon-do Province are still under 2 to 3 times more the average levels. And for this weekend, there's a spotty rain in the forecast for the central regions, including here in Seoul tomorrow, but the precipitation will be less than 5 millimeters, and this will be followed by clear and mostly sunny skies, meaning good air quality and pleasant temperatures for the country. And you might want to enjoy this warm autumn weather while you can, because things are about to get much chillier. Lows next week will plunge to the single digits, with highs hovering in the mid to low teens. So on that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for your Saturday. A daily low here in Seoul will kick off at 15 before getting up to 22, and Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 23, and Busan will have a mild Saturday with a high of 25. Now let's see how other regions are looking. Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 21 and 22, while Dokdo rises to 19. That's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
That's primetime news for you. Thank you for watching.